Hello and welcome to this free one.
It's the free one.
I've just welcomed that's going to happen every time at this
That's
point.
right. Yeah, it's an important thing to acknowledge that it is going to be the free one.
Yes,
I feel like I met a celebrity hearing that.
Yep.
It was me all along, Josie.
Yeah, Milo's.
It wasn't that what the guy that we get just to do that.
yeah. Well, he was costing a ton of money.
Yeah.
Just have like the guy from the commercials.
It was actually Sir Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the free one.
Yes, that's right. Well, it is the free one. And you're here with Riley, Milo, and Hussein. And we are joined by a friend of the show, I would say 4-time, I think 4 or possibly 5-time returning guest.
It's a few times. It's a few ass times.
Presented with a half bottle of champagne as a welcome gift. It's Josie Long.
Do you know what? Don't say shit like that when there's no champagne. It's cruel.
That's right.
Josie, you now have the Trashfuture Platinum Plus membership, where you do have access to the unlimited Oriental buffet between the hours of 3 and 6 in the members' lounge.
That's right. And you're no longer just access to the Well Cash Bar. You now have 2 premium drink tokens. Right, and those can be exchanged for Bombay Sapphire, Grey Goose even.
Yeah.
Grey Goose will take both tokens for one measure, but...
any cocktail of £10 or under is fine.
No more house spirits for this prick.
A couple more appearances and we'll send you to a resort, a wellness resort.
Yeah.
To be euthanized.
Where that guy who's doing viral rounds right now, the one who says that he's never read a book, like he's the one who's actually leading like the mindfulness course.
Please, that video with his searching dead eyes. I was hypnotized by it.
You just wanted to invest in his cryptocurrency or whatever. But actually, there's a picture going around the internet that I would very much like to discuss.
All right.
It is the DUP's Sammy Wilson just looking like looking himself like a sausage, standing in front of a blank but clearly dirty white wall with
a wall that looks like it's in a prison visiting area.
Yeah, like Sammy Wilson from the DUP standing in what appears to be a prison cell, standing in front of an Ulster is British poster,
which looks like it's from the 70s. It's very like old looking graphic design.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a poster that some guys promised to commit some murders to. And
I'm standing here with this handkerchief full of Prince Charles's fingers.
But it's a real open for a surprise image.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Holding in his hand none other than a bag of uncooked sausages just spilling over, going onto his... I assume he's just going to lick his... Like
these sausages are so pink. Is he using like an Instagram filter on this? I feel like he's really turned the saturation up because he's very like ruddy cheeked, and the sausages are outrageously pink. Like they are.
It just
like,
implies.
Yeah.
I think the way that he's holding the plastic bag sort of implies that he's like kept them in his jacket pocket. And he's just, like this is just like where the sausages, like it's the place for the sausages.
Like
you've got your keys, wallet, phone in one pocket. You've got your bag of raw sausages on the other.
He's a spiv selling you sausages. Hey, mate, would you happen to be in the market for any illegal meats?
I feel like there'd be some sort of saying as well, which would be like, a good Ulsterman keeps his sausages close to hand. And that will be part of it.
Well, keeps the sausages in his left pocket and his balaclava in his right.
So all of this is around... because this is something that I feel like we've lost the art of recently, which is different kinds of conservatives doing like weird literal protests about matters of technical constitutional matters. In this case, it's because there is a sort of a trade kerfuffle going on between the UK and EU about who gets to import chilled sausages at what quota. And of course, if that happens, then the Northern Ireland Protocol is threatened. And if that happens, the peace process is threatened. But because, Sammy Wilson's whole thing is just like his purpose in politics is to just be an embarrassing moron who doesn't get anything on behalf of the British state.
Yeah.
Right? Like it means that he's an effective tool. He just doesn't know that he's a blunt instrument of stupidity. Yeah. His first instinct was just to like run out to the local Tesco's and just like grab a handful of raw sausages to make a point about the peace process. And so Sammy Wilson, you have the TF salute of the week.
Hey, salute.
I just love the fact that he was like, I've got to talk about these sausages. But how would people understand I'm talking about sausages unless I'm holding...
Could these threaten the peace process? They're just sausages, you fools.
Man, congratulations, you're a real fucking paisan. This is incredible. Right. I'm really excited for like the UVF to start blowing up trucks of sausages.
Well, I mean, I'm excited for like as more different things become matters of like technical disagreement between the UK and EU, for more like Sammy Wilson type guys to just do extraordinary, like for example, how are they going to represent financial services? Is he going to like have like a little outfit with a green visor and just going to throw an adding machine off of the Harlan and Wolff
they're all
shipyards?
Just Brian Butterfield.
Yeah, they're just very literal. They're very literal
master
guys.
Of disguise, croupier, Lord Mayor's croupier.
They're very literal, and I love that kind of literal conservative posting.
I look forward to the new genre.
Yeah, but. Speaking of new genre, how about we go back to an old genre? I've got a startup for us.
All right.
It's a classic start. When I found it, I was like, this is like a season 1 startup.
Oh boy, is it a startup.
Yeah, it is a season 1 type of startup. It does, boy, does it ever do what it does. It's
Juicero era.
Late season 1.
The Juicero.
Yeah, I'd say it's late season 1. We're past Juicero.
The Juicacious period.
When we're kind of just getting into what became our focus in season 3. So,
Juicero Park.
It's called...
You did it, you crazy bastard. You really did. You brought the Juicero back. It's like Jeff Goldblum staring in awe as a giant Juicero marches across the plains.
Yeah, to press a giant bag.
Yeah, that's right.
It's called Kafene, and no, it's not spelled right. It's Kafene.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Josie, as the guest, you have first guess. What does caffeine do?
Wow. I mean, I feel like I'm about to like be laughed off, but it's got to be something to do with coffee, right?
Oh, sweet summer child, I'm afraid it is not. It has nothing to do with coffee.
Wait, you're telling me it doesn't squeeze coffee out of a bag?
I'm afraid, Milo, you're wrong as well. Not coffee out of a bag, nothing to do with coffee.
Oh, is it a way that people can pay monthly to have some sort of digital alarm clock?
Oh, it does involve paying monthly.
Okay.
Ooh, of course it does. Okay. They all do.
Hussein, give me your guess. It involves paying monthly, and it's called caffeine.
I'm actually stumped with this. I wonder what, like, is it some sort of like subscription service to a platform?
No.
Is it a subscription service where they deliver you like Pro Plus every month?
It's not a subscription service of any type.
Okay. Okay.
I'll give you guys one little bit of marketing copy, and it's gonna really help. We're Kafene, a mission-driven fintech with the goal of empowering flexible ownership solutions.
Ownership, flexible.
Is it where you can rent the shit in your house?
Close.
I've got an idea. Is it like a timeshare, but for like a shitty office cubicle or something?
Milo's closer. Josie, remember, you're empowering flexible ownership solutions. So try, if you need to, try and drink some pure grain alcohol to try and reduce some of the white matter in your head in case you need to figure out what they mean by this.
Is it you can get half a bike?
More or less.
Share a bike with your neighbor.
Here's the next little bit of a clue for you. Flexible ownership. Kafene helps consumers buy the things they want, and no credit is necessary.
Oh, fuck. Is it like a rent-to-own thing for buying stuff?
Okay, who all here knows the company Klarna or Affirm?
Oh,
You've seen it pop up.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, Neil Desai, former CEO of Octane Lending, and James Schuler, who participated in Y Combinator's accelerator program as a high schooler, he was not himself a high schooler.
This pervert's been dressing up as a school.
Yeah, that's right. He's the
we
school.
Must catch him. He really is a shit.
Yes, thank you very much to Peter Geddon Founded New York City-based Kafene in July 2019 by Chris Morris. The pair's goal is to promote financial inclusion by meeting the needs of what it describes as the consumers that are left behind by traditional lenders.
And it's not by giving them money.
Oh, well, you give it to them for a bit, but then, well,
we're some sort of we're kind of we're like a sort of marine animal of lending. That's what I would say. Yeah, we're just slipping through the water and we never stop.
Like a lone porpoise.
We don't sleep. Yeah, like a lone dolphin, maybe. Yeah, something like that. So,
that's the thing about dolphins. They're never alone. They're always in a pod.
That's right. Yeah, that's much like all of us here. We're actually we may be in different cities, but we're never alone either.
I remember one of my friends did a bit once about dolphins and how he read some stat online that was like over 10 innocent people are raped by dolphins every year, and he's like, which implies some of them weren't innocent. Some of them were asking for it. More specifically, Kafene is focused on helping consumers with credit scores below 650, which is subprime. Purchase retail items such as furniture, appliances, and electronics with its buy now, pay later model. Right.
Consider it Klarna for the subprime market.
Ooh.
So it's like...
what if... Right.
And as we know, subprime is always good, right? That's what I learned from The Great Short.
The Great Short. What a great short it was.
The Big Short.
F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Short.
Yeah,
that's right. The Great Short. But yeah, The Great Short is a great Gatsby, but where Gatsby always references that he's 5 foot 3.
So, basically, right. So this is just Klarna so far. It's just a buy now, pay later thing. Where if you don't know how that works, is by charging a fee usually to the business and then charging you a bunch of fees if you don't pay properly. These buy now, pay later organizations will essentially extend you credit to buy a whiz bang or whatever.
And they do it on like surprisingly low priced goods. Like you get offered to do it on stuff that's like 15 quid.
Yeah, and you can pay for it in like 3 or 4 installments. And then they make their money charging the merchant and then you fees if anything goes wrong, which if frequently it does. However, so how do we make that if we can't charge higher fees to the buyer, how do we make it for the subprime? Because any credit model, a product to the subprime has to therefore be much more stringent, or else it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense as a business. Effectively, they say Kafene's flexible ownership model. Remember that word, is designed to not let the worst happen to a consumer, which is if you miss a payment on your credit card, your credit score is impacted. If for some reason someone cannot make a payment, Kafene simply comes to pick up the item, and the customer is no longer under any obligation to pay for it moving forward. We've invented Repo Man.
Can't see this going wrong.
So basically, you pay for a year for your bike. And then you miss one payment and they just take it away.
Then what you've done is you've effectively rented a bike, it turns out. Hope you planned for that.
Yeah.
Especially, for example, if you've bought a bike with this system because you're, say, a Deliveroo driver, maybe you've basically what you're doing is you have to build equity in your bike. And if you miss a payment, they foreclose on it.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that.
So, don't get sick.
No, never get sick.
No, don't do that.
So there's one thing Trashfuture advises is do not get sick.
Because what's happened is you've been enabled to access the means of transport required for your job in a flexible ownership model, which benefits both you, it benefits you, your community, the business, and the lender. And with all of this mutual benefit, just don't get sick and it'll be fine.
Right. So okay. Say I buy some boxing gloves via this, and I'm using them all the time because I love to box. That's something well known about me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then
Josie Not Long, they call her.
Clubber Long.
Yeah,
I'm a terror of the ring. Now
that's right.
That's right. So say I buy them on like 3 years, and I'm bashing the shit out of them for 2 years, and then I get ill for a week and can't pay for them, and they come take them away. What are they doing with them? Are they selling them? Are they now also like an eBay shop as well? Like,
well, in your case, Josie, they're selling them to perverts. These are Josie Long's sweaty boxing gloves.
You don't realise if there was the slightest pervert economy for anything I used, I would have jumped on that shit. But there's none. There's no niche.
Yeah.
There's no need.
Josie's got very impecunious perverts. They're like, I would love to buy some used clothing of yours, Josie, to like sniff or just enjoy. But
unfortunately, I have not been enabled
to rent to own scheme.
I have not been enabled to access a flexible ownership model.
Can't pay. I'll take it back. I'll wear it some more. Now that is a scheme that works.
Yeah.
Because the used goods have a place to go.
They're actually going up in value.
Who wants a fucking 2-year-old TV that's been half paid off?
Flexible OnlyFans.
That's right. So they say so they bought. So what happens actually is you don't own the thing. Okay. At no point until you finish paying it off do you actually own the thing. It's not even like you've bought it on credit. Kafene has bought it for you. And then you have to pay them back. And if you don't pay them back, then they just claim ownership of the thing that they already have. So the title of your boxing glove stays with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
I hate it when I have to work out the deeds on my boxing gloves.
They're just accruing goods. Like, so is this someone who wants stuff, but they can't, they feel like they don't deserve it, so they need to put it through an elaborate system?
Well, I think I suppose what they do is they probably just, I mean, a lot of things that people buy do have resale value, things like computers, TVs, furniture, etc., etc.
Yeah. Josie Long's used clothing.
Yeah, Josie Long's used hat.
Are they reselling? Like, what is this? Is this a platform as well? Like,
I think they sell it probably to I don't think they sell it to private individuals. I think it's a B2B.
They do it by that Northern Irish politician. He's got a trench coat full of stuff. Someone hadn't finished paying off those sausages. That's how they ended up in his fucking pocket.
That's right. So
they're largely still good.
Only a little bit eaten.
Yeah.
And
it's a few bites. What are you, Lord Fauntleroy?
And so what I think is very funny, right, is that this is described as freedom.
Ah.
Yeah. So they also work with an AI analytics firm called Synaptic to, quote, better understand a borrower's ability to pay. So effectively, you just get sort of all your shit analyzed by some shit that doesn't work because AI, as we all know, is basically.
Why the fuck is this called Kafene? I hate these people so much, and I hate them even more because of their terrible aesthetic choices. Like, this is obviously an evil company on the face of it, but like, if it didn't have such a stupid fucking name, I would hate it noticeably less.
Yeah. What if it was called like Lend By?
I mean, that would be much more literal. That wouldn't be a good startup name.
Lender.
Yeah.
At the end, of course.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
right. No E.
What happened to Fiverr? Did that go under?
Oh, it's still up.
Sad.
It's still fiving.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is basically what they're doing. And the thing is, right? This is another fucking model. Remember how like Klarna was nowhere and then it was everywhere? Kafene, same thing. They're now, well, they say anyway, that they're no longer taking on new merchant partners, which means that effectively the subprime borrower for consumer goods market that is, has grown to the point where they're no longer have capacity to sign new clients. So expect to see more of Kafene.
We love like different iterations of the rentier economy. It's all great. It's all fun.
Yeah, we're basically remember the whole point of fintech is to create debt and then call it something else. And that's what we've done here. We've renamed debt flexible ownership.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I think it's great.
It's flexible ownership because you might own it and then suddenly you don't, and that's pretty flexible.
That's very flexible.
That's not a very solid concept of ownership.
It feels to me like a mandala, you know?
Yeah,
like you think you got a painting, nah, you got nothing.
Yeah. Everything you own is basically an Etch-a-Sketch, and a big guy can come along and just shake it and like, hey, you can start again. That's pretty flexible, huh?
Yeah. Don't you hate being hemmed in by all of these lines you've drawn in the Etch-a-Sketch? Don't you wish that you didn't have all this stuff you did? I can take it off your hands for you.
That's right. Do you not feel burdened by your worldly possessions? Just doing like wellness Baz shit. Like, do you not feel that all of these possessions are preventing you from ascending to your true spiritual
self? Are you suggesting that wellness Baz bailiff?
Yeah. Well, this is Bazliff.
Can I say, I literally just wrote a short story about two young women who decide to pretend to be wellness gurus in order to fleece the rich for everything they own. And I'm so proud of myself that I got my finger on the pulse. Like it's never been the case before in my life.
It's so far on the pulse.
They hate to see it. They hate to see a girl boss winning.
That's right. That's Kafene. So start your investment engines.
Yeah, that's right. You should invest in them. This is not investment advice.
No, this is not investment advice.
It's not investment advice. Actually, it's probably quite a good investment because although they're an evil company, it's the kind of stupid evil company that actually kind of does increase in value quite rapidly.
If you're not an accredited investor, you will not be able to invest because it would require a public investment in private equity. Private investment in public equity.
So if you're a billionaire, this could be construed as investment advice, but it is still not.
You would need to get a license as a family office.
I don't think we have any billionaire customers.
All right. Well, now that boilerplate disclaimer,
that disclaimer that we put into every episode.
Yep, that's the FCA makes you say that.
Yeah. 2021, getyourdicksucked.com.
I want to talk a little bit about the goddamn news. It's news time. If Alice were here, she would play the goddamn news stinger. But she's not.
It's the news.
Just open up.
No, it's the news. Good morning, Theo.
No, it's the evening news. So it'd be like dun dun dun.
Yeah.
No, that's morning news, isn't it? Yeah. No, morning news is like more impactful.
Look, depending on when you're listening to it, play the right news stinger.
That's right.
Don't embarrass yourself, listener.
Yeah,
not you.
That's right.
Listener, don't embarrass yourself.
Yeah, listener. Yeah. So, there are a few things that sort of came up that I'd like to discuss. What do we think? I think let's start with this Queen nonsense. I don't want to talk about any of the specifics involved. I just think it is very illustrative of certain elements of why this country is like it is.
Oh yeah.
So, for context, at the Magdalen College MCR, a group of students voted to remove a picture.
Not even the JCR.
No, the MCR.
Fucking MCR.
A bunch of Americans who were there for 1 year.
Yeah. Which for people who are not Oxbridge cunts, the MCR, like the JCR, would be like the college common room for undergraduates, which is most of the students, like the one that people actually go to. And the MCR is like a common room that's only for graduate students.
Correct.
And so it's always like a dead ass room. It's like not a room that people hang out in.
The MCR is not a fun room.
Yeah, it's not a room that anyone cares about.
No, it is the least consequential room in a very inconsequential place.
Yeah, like this is really like, we're in the darkest cellar of the darkest house on the street here. You know what I mean? It's midnight. We're looking for a black cat that isn't there. You know what I mean? Like,
that sounds like you're trying to sell me something.
Yeah. Look, do you
I
like
think it's
pyramids?
very funny. Like as like the only non-Oxbridge person here, I think we just had like one common room at York. That was it. And
was there a picture of the Queen in it?
There was like one of those like really bad reenactment of that, the Kitchener poster.
Yeah.
Except it was just like demanding that you wash your cups.
Oh yeah. York University, whilst technically collegiate, is actually more of a polycule.
That's right.
And all of the students sleep in one big bed together.
Yeah, that's right. That's a big bed. So
that's right.
Anyway, this picture of the Queen was just someone put it up in like 2013, and then the students, the graduate students who are Americans who were there for 1 year.
Some fucking nerd put it up in 2013.
What fucking nerd in 2013 was like, we need a picture of the Queen?
In 2013, everyone was listening to, like everyone like sort of red pants and everything.
Yeah. The thing is, it might have even been put up as a joke. Like, that's quite possible.
Oh, of course.
But because it's at an Oxford college, everyone assumes... Actually, no, to be fair, it's the MCR. Again, JCR, plausibly a joke. MCR, no.
Anyway,
Probably
happened,
just a nerd.
What happened is they voted to take it down, being like, this is a bit colonial. Yeah, fine. She literally is the Queen who used to be the Empress of India. But I'm going to say... that is all I really want to discuss about the event, other than the fact I think what they should have done is taken it down and then put up a poster of like Scarface or a Miller Lite sign, or like the one of the two girls kissing in black and white, like
the tennis skirt picture where she's like scratching her ass.
Yeah, they could, or like a pyramid of beer cans.
I think they should have put it up back with huge titties. That's what I think. Yeah, Photoshop them on.
Yeah, big anime titties.
Yeah, that's right.
Actually, does have large breasts, like not to be treasonous, but she does.
Yeah, I don't think that's treasonous. I think it would be treasonous to say the opposite. Yeah, we're saying the Queen has lovely naturals. That's the Trashfuture position.
Right in with what you think is true. Who's treasonous? Is it Milo or Josie?
So I think Josie and I are in agreement, actually.
You're both treasonous. Anyway, the point is that what then occurred was someone told Guido Fawkes, who was like one guy. He was a guy.
That's a big thing about etiquette with the Queen. When you meet her, you can't stare at her rack. Even when you're curtsying, she's like, my eyes are up here. I know. They're big mummy milkers.
Oh my god, that's so cursed.
Someone clearly just told Paul Staines, drink driving enthusiast Paul Staines.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Also, like lots of like Guido Fawkes's like tips and stuff come from like students who are looking for like internships and everything.
Yeah.
So like, in fact, like almost all the kind of journalists who like work in mainstream media now who started off at Guido Fawkes and stuff were like students who were giving tips to Paul Staines during the undergraduate years, often snitching on other students.
Shouts out to actual listener of the show, Tom Harwood.
That's right.
Oh, I forgot he subs to us.
Yeah.
What's that guy?
Yeah,
he's the republishing the fascist conspiracy site and then refusing to acknowledge it guy, right?
No, that's the guy from Tim. Another Tom or whatever kind.
Oh, is it?
It's too hot today.
It's all it's hot today.
It's too hot.
But yeah, like Guido Fawkes, especially as Guido Fawkes is kind of like now, they aren't really even kind of on a basic like news and Westminster level, are just not producing the same types of stuff as they used to. Like they have gone through like this culture change where not only have they become more adjacent to the government like every other like Westminster reporter, but they also kind of know that the bread and butter isn't in Westminster gossip, it's in like culture war stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're like the incentives for students looking for like internships or whatever, or even just like bylines, because like internships don't really exist anymore, is very much there. And I think that's why we kind of get dumb stories like this, and why we will continue to get dumb stories like this.
It is just objectively extremely funny to run an incredibly pro-monarchy website called Guido Fawkes.
It's quite funny.
It's sort of just an absolute 11 out of 10 heightening the contradictions meter.
So, basically, for a little more context, what that happened is this one right-wing blog that's just where all the news comes from now because of the way that the media ecosystem works, was like got just a random snitch just said, hey, they've taken down the picture of the Queen. And then the right-wing blog then publishes it, then every newspaper runs with it, puts it on the front page, and then what happens then is a bunch of like people from the nominally opposition party are like marched into a bunch of radio stations where they then have to they're then like ritually humiliated and told that they have to agree with the government, basically.
Yeah, it's like basically like when there's been a military coup. Except it happens every week, just like Keir Starmer is marched into LBC and forced to like recant what he said the previous week by like a guy in a different hat.
It's because, right? Like, this is a fake country. It is, or rather, more specifically, it is an entirely fake political system. It is Potemkin. There is nothing there. There was no row. There was no row over this.
It was students. They're all idiots. No one cares.
Nothing happened. Like the idea that the left backed itself. It didn't. Nothing actually happened. No event has occurred. But
who are the left, Chris?
The entire political media ecosystem of this country is basically like has to live an insane life where they have to pretend that something has happened and that it's very important that it be discussed. And I think like I've said earlier, right? Like the problem with Jeremy Corbyn was that he was the last sane person in the British political media ecosystem. He was the last person who would probably say, I don't particularly care. They can do what they want with their MCR. And you could not be allowed to continue being in politics.
Sort of muttering it from his bike while he was cycling back in his full Wilson tracksuit from like playing the fruit machines at the pub.
From the allotment,
what a king.
Come on.
Miss that guy.
Yeah. He's not getting the fruities. He's growing his own.
Honestly, this is really grist for my opinion that I'm becoming increasingly wedded to, which is that when your society is raised on nothing but a diet of like visceral and paranoid anti-communism,
it becomes really good.
Well, the thing is, even when the USSR goes away, those people's paranoia doesn't. Like, I think it's no coincidence that...
Also, a lot of them aren't even aware that the USSR went away, as we've learned from years and years, where Russell T. Davies literally says the Soviet army at one point.
On the Patreon.
Yeah, subscribe to the Patreon.
FCA makes us say that too.
Yeah, they do.
But I think, like, it's, again, no one cares about the painting, the picture even, give a fuck. But it's just, it shows that, like, in order to be a political participant in this country, in order to be a media figure, you are going to have to live in a paranoid fantasy world where you have to pretend that there is a malicious fifth column of, like, anti-monarchists and woke stuff. You have to pretend the woke Stasi is around every corner and could be poised to take over at every moment.
That's what the fifth pillar of Islam is. Yeah. It's the woke Stasi.
Well, funnily enough, none other than Dan Hodges basically admitted that to me yesterday.
Yeah. Wow.
Where his whole thing was basically just like, if the quote unquote left are faced with this problem, they should simply say, I am on the side of the Queen, and that's it, right? And I asked Dan kind of like, okay, so what you're basically saying is that, like, basically more than half of the population, including, like, vote, like half the population of voters, not even just like general people, should just like live in constant fear that any sort of mundane decision that they make could be interpreted as like treason. Yeah. And he was just like, yeah,
absolutely. Well, how else is society going to be defended, Hussein, if we don't make sure the traitors are worried about being caught for treason?
And obviously, like, it's an obvious thing that we've spoken about on the show a lot, and like all our, it's something that we take for granted. I thought about what was interesting about the Dan interaction, small as it was that he basically just like it was basically like a mask off moment, because he's an incredibly stupid but like weirdly earnest guy who I think just enjoys the fact that like he gets like online attention.
Who would?
And I won't like, yeah. And I think it's a combination of those things. It's like, and ultimately it's also like a news ecosystem that is very, very heavily reliant on Twitter to like repeat and kind of regurgitate stories that it thinks is important, because it doesn't have any idea about like what's going on or how to like interrogate power. And I think there's like this other set of the ecosystem, which is like Guido Fawkes and Talk Radio, and from next week GB News, that understand that like they can manufacture news really, really simply with like this primed audience of extremely online boomers who will get angry at like any sort of concoction of the left.
I'm very excited for like, all of our news media to just become the Cambridge Tab. Like, that's great.
What it really is it is about, I think you say, when you say it's about finding traitors, like, that's true. It is about identifying individuals. And we saw this as well, even in the 2019 election. We've sort of seen it since, to be honest, we've seen it since about 2010. Realistically,
right,
where the newspapers, after Leveson sort of fizzled out, the newspapers realized there was nothing that stood in the way of them basically just making it their job to identify what the line of treachery was, and then find people who've crossed over it, and then basically mount public hate campaigns against them. That's effectively
great.
what it was.
I love it.
And I think this whole poster debacle, so it doesn't matter in itself, but it matters because it is the perfect representation of a synapse misfiring in the dying brain of this country.
It's also quite shocking to me, because I feel like even 3 years ago, they would have had to have done something for this to happen. Like, something would have had to have happened in some way. Someone might have had to express a left-wing opinion, or boycott something, or stop something happening. And here it's literally people saying, let's redecorate the common room. And that's enough. Like, that to me is so shocking.
Well,
and to be fair, they shouldn't have replaced it with a picture of Gaddafi. I don't understand why they did that.
They should have replaced it with a picture of Gaddafi looking strong.
Yeah, that would have been good, actually. That would have been cool.
Right.
But they shouldn't have turned the MCR into a mosque.
I think realistically, the way to understand this is that the British press has essentially declared war on most people who live here.
Oh, yeah.
And about a third of the population of the people who live here are all too willing to, back them.
I think they've almost declared war on everyone who lives in this country. It's like because even the people who read it declares war on them some of the time, but it's like it's usually not about you enough of the time that you enjoy the outrage. I used to remember this a lot, like when I was at Cambridge, that there would be like every year there would be like a slow of Daily Mail articles between like April and June, which is when all the big like Cambridge University parties happen, which would be just like taking pictures of students having a few drinks and having a nice time, and or like in black tie going to dinner. And just being like, disgusting university, you are the future leaders of this country. One of them stood on a bin. Are you not outraged? And then literally the rest of the year, the Daily Mail would be like, send your children to Oxbridge, send them there, or they're scum. Like, and it's like, this is an interesting newspaper.
They were simply very angry that Cambridge students were disrespecting the bin men, and I, for one, agree with that.
We were always disrespecting
Bins
the bin
are
men.
for emptying, not for standing.
That's right.
Remember when the bin man used to be able to kill you if you stood on the bin?
I lived above a chain fish restaurant, and on Monday mornings, I was always very hungover at about 6 a.m. They thought that was the perfect
it the caviar
time
prunier
to-
that's all in the airports?
No, it was lock fine. They used to like to tip a dumpster full of 500 glass bottles into a bin lorry right underneath my bedroom window. I hated it. That was the time in my life where I respected the bin men the least.
I thought you were going to say
Well,
a
I hope you
dumpster
learn.
of rotting fish. So actually, sounds like you got a very.
It would have been less noisy, Josie. It would have been less noisy.
So, but the reason I bring this up again is that to participate in the politics in the mainstream of this country, you have to understand that it's an entirely pretend affair, where non-real things are things where our small coterie of print media assholes can make up anything they really want and then just declare war on you forever. And I think it's because like they resent that Leveson even happened.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's easier the stupider you are. Like, I swear Dan Hodges was like grown in a fucking Soviet lab in their efforts to create an absolute zero IQ for the purposes of calibrating the test.
Yeah, he's a NIST standard moron.
That's right. Yeah. Like, if you were like, the Soviet Union went too close to the sun when they tried to build a baboon that gets every question wrong.
Can I say we are leaving out one of the key aspects of the story, which is the absolutely creepy as hell internal decor of the Tory MP Andrea Jenkins showing off her fucking shrine to the Queen in her living room.
She had some fairy lights on it.
Yeah, it's got a picture of the Queen and then two little circular pictures of the young Queen and young Prince Philip next to it in a fucking house.
Nice.
And then, I feel like, I'm not saying it makes the whole thing worth it because it doesn't, but things like that, things like Michael Gove's bookshelves, at the very least, it's emboldening these people to give away more than they should. And these things can be kept and studied.
If you go into a man's house and he doesn't have a picture of the Queen with fairy lights on it and a little picture of the young Queen and a little picture of young Prince Philip next to it, don't fuck him.
Yeah.
Listen.
And then if he's not holding a bag of sausages, if he's not in a ladies, if you're going into your man's prison cell and he's not holding a bag of sausages and standing in front of an Ulster,
don't give him the heroin you smuggled in your asshole.
Anyway, so with a little bit of stupid news discussion out of the way, I want to get to why we're all actually here. Because
it's to talk about our good friend Riley.
Yes, it's the intervention. I've been making too many episode notes.
Riley's to organize an intervention for himself. And that's ironically what the intervention is about.
Yeah, no, so...
we're desperately trying to stop him from becoming a DJ.
Yes, I'm afraid that train has left the station, my friend. There has recently been an article in the Atlantic that has, I think, been garnering some attention over here because Tom McTague, a man without object permanence,
a man with a fucking name,
a man with no object permanence at all, has written a piece on our Prime Minister Boris Johnson for American liberal audiences. Now, the piece is primarily concerned with asking the question, is Boris Johnson Britain's Donald Trump? Because they couldn't think of a better question, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a fucking stupid question.
That's a stupid question to hang your article on. Yeah, no, he's a different kind of guy. It's a different kind of thing.
It's a very different kind of guy.
Yeah, he's much more of an ordinary Tory. he's just, a little bit more sort of, colorful than Theresa May.
Boris Johnson actually is one of the less reactionary people in the current Tory party, to my mind. Like, he's just cynical.
Well, I mean, when you basically is like, yeah, well, it's him, and then everyone who wrote Britannia Unchained and Priti Patel and stuff, like, it's hard to get more reactionary than them.
Yeah, like Priti Patel is way more like Trump. She's incredibly reactionary and she's stupid.
That's right.
Boris Johnson isn't quite either of those things.
But nevertheless, I think it's worth talking about this because it's answering the question: how is our politics scene, and also there's almost a little bit of a you might say a liberal soft selling of Boris Johnson, right? A desire to sort of it feels like a marketing piece. And I don't think Tom McTague necessarily set out to write it. I just think he's very easily bamboozled.
But I think also there's something you have to bear in mind, of course, whenever we talk about American politics, is that, like, in real terms, Boris Johnson is to the left of most American liberals. Not because he'd like to be, but just because that's where the relative Overton windows are.
I think that it's one of these things where I think I can't comment on where I think he'd like to be. I think he happens to govern a country that happens to have some things like socialized medicine, but I don't think it's even sort of instructive to compare the two.
He wouldn't be bringing about the NHS. He wouldn't be. There's not a single one of our.
And neither would fucking Keir Starmer at this point.
Oh my God, it would be so awful. It would be.
I welcome the proposal for free healthcare from the government, but I think we could go further by creating a structured system of incentives, which, if the Prime Minister had read the handbook, he would have known that on page 94 there was a typo.
Yeah.
And that is what I would like to talk about today.
Yeah, and we've got a new system where if you can't pay for your operation, then actually Kafene comes and takes your kidneys back.
That's right.
But no, so I do slightly disagree, actually. I think it's not instruct. And again, Tom McTague makes this sort of same statement in the article, and I think, like, it is, in fact, Boris Johnson is constrained by different things than Americans are constrained by. But I think the crucial thing is that it's less about what makes American Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, labor, and so on different, and more about what essentially makes them all the same. As Josie said, none of them would have started the NHS.
Yeah.
None of them are willing to really build anything. They're all just different kinds of privatizers and dismantlers. The difference is that the Tories and the Republicans have both identified the language of patronage and anti-austerity, whereas the Democrats and Labor are sort of still stuck in the 90s, that we've talked about before. Does it mean, though, that because they've identified the language as politically useful, it doesn't necessarily mean that, say, they're going to go through with doing any of it, but they have understood that it is something that they can sell. And someone like Tom McTague buys every bit of it. So I'm going to start slightly out of order with something that comes about 2/3 into the article, because I believe it is illustrative of how this article works. What am I doing this for? Johnson asked his aides, looking at his schedule for the day and seeing a slot carved out to talk to me. It's for the profile I advised you not to do, James Slack, Johnson's then director of communications said.
Slack.
But you can see what he's doing there, right? Which is he has essentially said to his director of communications, now this is very important. Well, I'm going to ask you this question. I'm going to need you to imply that this journalist is too good and too incisive, and that it would be dangerous to talk to him. And then,
which I'm sure is borne out in the rest of the piece. I'm sure it's a really hostile interview.
Oh, absolutely. Where effectively, you could see sort of McTague kind of sucking himself off a little bit over being told that,
which is impressive, to be fair.
I advised you not to do this. And then being like, ooh, I'm dangerous. I'm Woodward and Bernstein.
Again, if I'd ever taken any advice, I probably wouldn't have had however many wives it is.
So, anyway, so I think that's illustrative of sort of what's going on in the piece generally. So it opens with Boris jumping into a demo tram in a factory in Birmingham while doing a photo op for the election of Andy Street. And the following line occurs in the color for the introduction, which can sum up the vast majority of what the thing goes on to say. Johnson was, as usual, unkempt and amused, a tornado of bonhomie in a country where politicians tend to be phlegmatic and self-serious.
Fuck off.
If not...
A tornado of bonhomie.
Yeah.
Oh, the image that's in my mind right now is the one from South Park where the guy's come all over himself.
Uh-huh.
Like, that's what Tom McTague was doing while writing this.
Also, to me, this his shtick just seems so transparent. Like, how would anyone at this stage be being like, wow, he's just so charming, and not like he's got one shit gag and he just does that?
Josie, that's because you're not a writer for The Atlantic and you're not as easily taken.
Or indeed a huge number of posh women. Boris Johnson is just like catnip for a certain class of women, isn't he? I don't know what it is, but like they want to fuck Boris.
Right? Why?
I think it's that classic thing of like, I can change him.
Yeah, I take that. I do. But I just like...
He sleeps in a clothes nest now, but...
He does not have the energy of somebody... And I don't want to sound graphic, like, who am I? But, like, he does not have the energy of somebody who has ever, like, bothered to make a woman come in his life. Like, he does not have, like, any energy of that.
I have to disagree. I think the cooperation between my lips and the pussy has been positively glutinous on this issue.
I'm sorry. Like, I'm not trying to be crass. But, like, yeah, he's vile. He's awful. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, please carry on.
No, I just...
Boris Johnson doing the Greek alphabet on the clitoris.
He only knows the first 5 letters. Yeah. That's the worst part. He doesn't even know that shit.
That's why. He only knows the first 5 letters. He never gets all the way down the alphabet.
That's
exactly.
right. Yeah.
He never bothers.
So he's like, well, all done. Yeah, so...
It's supposed to be Alpha and Omega, Boris. I did the Q voice there.
Do you remember...
Do you try and bring this clitoris back in One Piece 007?
I feel like it's not Peter Oborne, but he's about the only person that I'm like, he seems all right. I feel like Peter Oborne, but it might have been like a BBC guy. Do you remember that article that was written about Boris Johnson in 2019? Oh, God, I'm sorry. This is a total detour, isn't it? But there was an article written about him where he said that he saw him once perform at a gala event and he showed up late.
Yes.
And he showed up in this
I remember this. It was Peter Oborne.
Oh, was it? Great. He showed up in this cloud and he told this very sort of charming enough anecdote and it pulled it off, brought the house down, and everyone was like, wow, he's pulled that out of his arse. How great. And then he saw him again do the exact same thing over and over again. And I just feel so embarrassed that Britain just sucks this shit up over and over again. And
Boris Johnson is a club comic. That's basically what we're saying. And he's got a tight 20. Yeah, and he is fucking whipping it out everywhere.
Where'd you learn to whisper?
Yeah, but in this case...
in a helicopter.
But in this case, it is being sucked up by I cannot emphasize this to you enough. It is for an American audience.
Yeah.
Right. So we are essentially the thing that,
which is why he's saying shit like a tornado of bonhomie.
Yeah,
and Americans sitting there going, "Wow, I didn't even know half of those words. That's incredible." I love that.
So anyway, he's at this tram factory. So Johnson's aide told me, Tom McTague, that the Prime Minister had been excited about his tram ride all morning. All aboard, he yelled. Though there were no passengers. News photographers crowded around and men in hats stood by. When Johnson finally made hard hats, sorry.
Oh, right.
When Johnson finally made it around the bend.
The launch of Stevenson's rocket.
He slammed the brakes and
Men
busted
in
the
lamb
horn.
chops.
Nothing went wrong. Of course, nothing really could have gone wrong. The tram was limited to 3 miles an hour and had an automatic override system to protect it from reckless prime ministers, among others.
That's a very specific override system.
Yeah, that's right. No. Disraeli can't be using this.
Yeah. Gladstone only.
Yeah. But again, it's the... It is Tom McTague sort of trying to be like, I'm going to get to the core of Boris Johnson. I'm going to figure out what there is to know about him. And immediately his main thing is just now. But first, he's given me 3 cards and assured me that a bean is underneath one. I just have to identify which one it is, and then I will be able to engage in my penetrating review of his character.
I think the mistake to be made is that this was supposed to be that Tom McTague was like intending for it to be an interrogative piece, and like not even like with the ambition of really like criticizing him or questioning his sort of like assumed position in British polite society for decades now. But even just kind of the most remote criticism, because as we sort of know with journalists who have criticized the government, they've lost like proximity, and they've lost access, and they've lost like the very few ways in which they can actually hold ministers to account. And like the kind of media story of the Conservative government, from the Cameron years, but like specifically from the Johnson years, is very much about like journalists. Like favored journalists are ones who have proximity, and ones who, and unfavored ones don't. And and that's also kind of like the situation with the British press, who really value their press passes above, or they really value their like Westminster passes above everything else, which is that they kind of know that they have to play ball if they want to have like this access. So like this dependence on access journalism and this dependence on like proximity kind of means that, the government have been very successful in basically like neutering any kind of like impetus of critique from reporters, which is sort of why, I do kind of feel a little bit sorry for Keir Starmer sometimes, because I do kind of think
just
that,
so I want to be clear, I do not.
Yeah, I said very, like a very, very small amount. Which is like ultimately like Keir Starmer can kind of do the most sort of like mundane proposals of like social democracy, and he'll get like fucking hound, and he won't. But like I think there's a reason why he won't, which is that he knows he'll get fucking hounded by the press if he does that, right? And I think ultimately that's the thing. It's like this is just a press that's just been very conditioned for a long time to value proximity above
and to
everything
declare war
else.
on everyone who's not useful to them.
Can I say also, it mimics their strategy of, awarding funding to places that vote Conservative, shielding Conservative councils from cuts. Like what they're doing is they're saying either you're with us or fuck you, and if you're not with us and you try to explain what it's like, people who are with us will be like, well, it's not like that for me, so you're obviously in the wrong.
Yeah.
And I think
doing Roman army shit.
One of the key things here, right, is to see this, as you're describing, Josie, like this whole sort of this funding complex that we've talked about before, where it's like a patronage system where if you submit, if you sort of understand where you are and you submit in the hierarchy, then you'll basically be kept alive. But also to understand how that connects to. Because like the only way people understand politics is really by consuming political media or hearing other people who've consumed political media talk about it, right? And the
Welcome to Trashfuture.
And the only way that that then your picture of what your country's politics is formed is through that. But if, as we've already established, this is a fake country, it is not a real place. That it is that these sort of stories that exist in the imaginations of columnists, and the stories that exist in the imaginations of columnists that create friends and enemies that sort of draw political lines without sort of acknowledging it. And so, for example, your coverage of the prime minister is sort of fawning, and your coverage of some random guy or some random Americans that decide to like redecorate their common room is oppositional and searching and personal. Because, right, we have the sort of power political and media elite in this country have figured out that it makes more sense for them to all work together.
I really hate being made to defend MCR Americans.
Yeah.
That's
the worst part of this.
Yeah, one of my most hated groups.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
An annoying bunch.
I think as well, like, it does, I mean, I know this is a point that gets made all the time, but like the last, the way that many people who should have known better allowed the way that Corbyn and the Labour Party were treated in that exact same confrontational, oppositional, personal, fictional, when it comes to things like the Czech spy bollocks, all of that stuff, they allowed it because it was convenient to them. And they must have known on some level that they were creating conditions that they wouldn't be able to reverse.
Now, Josie, I've swallowed this fly, but I've swallowed this spider, and I'm pretty sure that's going to solve this fly problem. And then clear sailing for me from then on.
That's
you
right.
know?
Yeah.
And then I never
released all these mongooses.
And then I never had to swallow anything again.
Yeah, that's right.
But you know what, though? She wasn't hungry, was she?
Yes, that's right. There was a little old lady who swallowed a fly, and then she swallowed a spider to eat the fly, and then it was fine.
Yeah, that's right. That's how the rhyme goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then she took down her picture of the Queen, and that's when things started going wrong.
Yeah. So it also, the other thing about the profile is that it tends to hangs on the key question of is Boris Johnson Donald Trump, which is, as I think we've made abundantly clear, a very stupid question.
It's quite
not
clearly
worth
a
asking.
very different guy. A lot of people, they won't tell you that, but it's true, actually. He's not the same at all.
Yeah. And then the event that it hangs off of is the European Super League, which you recall we discussed with Musa Okwonga. And because the reporter happened to be with Johnson while this was all going on.
Of course.
So it was announced the night before, McTague writes, and Johnson had come out against it, arguing that it would yank England's grandest clubs from their traditional environment against the wishes of their fans. It was unfair, he said, and his government would fight it. Now, going beyond the fact that it is absolutely not clear on the public record that Johnson was in opposition to this when it was proposed, and that he didn't just sort of hitch his wagon to it when it became clear that it was very unpopular, right? This is not clear, and it's something that McTague just leaves in, just writes it in.
Yeah, no need to interrogate that.
No, heavens no.
Give the man the benefit of the doubt.
That's right.
That's what journalism is.
Would not Socrates have given me the benefit of the doubt?
So, it says, in one of our conversations, Johnson had said that people need to feel part of something bigger than themselves. He told me that he doesn't think of himself as a nationalist, but he argued that individuals need to feel that they belong and they shouldn't be patronized for worrying that their traditions or connections are being eroded. And again, that's just the soft sell, right, of the actual machine in this country, which is to preserve, to basically preserve the authority and property of the sort of gentry or capital or whatever at any cost, even as it's like cultural outrider institutions like the royal family are attract minor criticism, that we essentially have to have a Bush doctrine where it is crushed. And
that's what's interesting about the Tories.
As Johnson frames it that way, right? That, people don't want to be patronized for worrying that traditions are being eroded. That's just the sort of that's the pleasant end of that stick. That's the nice way of phrasing it. But what effectively he does is that he sort of seems like he's feeding this line to Johnson, and then Johnson is able to say, yes, absolutely, that's what I think. This is about the deracination of the community fan base. And then he goes on some reverie for several paragraphs about how I was struck by his use of the word deracinate to describe the particular dynamics of English soccer partisanship. To be deracinated is to be uprooted from your customs and culture and home. Here, Johnson was offering himself as the People's Tribune, defender of the national game from the threat of an alien imposition.
I would invite Tom McTague to please come and join me and really experience the deracination of English soccer partisanship by walking into this greasy spoon in Millwall wearing a West Ham shirt. I will be there to provide advice while he does this, but I will be wearing a Millwall shirt.
It's such an annoying sort of stepping in on page 55 or 56. Like, is he not aware of like how money has affected football in the last 40 years? Like, he must be like, is he not aware of what the Premier League is? Like, it's just so annoying to be like,
of course he's not, he's American.
Salt the earth.
Or even, or especially, right, is he not aware, or is he not aware, or does he not want to be aware? Because if you want to be aware, then suddenly you're no longer playing pretend with the rest of them and you're out, right? That effectively, like, that this is just a story, right? That this is, that the story that is being told now, the story that is being told as the outrider of sort of British capital is essentially a homey Middle England with a vicar riding a bike, etc., etc., etc. And that's just the marketing of the Tory party now. And McTague has essentially come in as a journalist being like, well, they've helpfully given me all of this marketing. I could just print that.
Johnson asked me, did I remember when the bin men were hard? And I said, what's a bin man?
I think he's British.
And I love that he used the word bin.
Yeah.
It was, well, like, he's British.
Hang on.
He probably also says Lou. I love that.
Well, he's London-based. I don't know if he's British. Anyway.
He simply writes with the kind of smooth-brained lackadaisicalness of an American commentating on something British.
Yes, that is true. Effective, and if you want to like get the real meat of this, right, is when in the "So you're not Donald Trump?" I asked Johnson. What I keep coming back to that as just like,
no, because women want to fuck Boris Johnson. We don't understand why. But they do.
He says, well, I had been just treated to a long monologue about his liberal internationalism in support of a free trade, climate action, and even globalism. Well, self-evidently, he replied, the point I'm trying to get over to you and your readers is that you mustn't mistake this government for being sort of a bunch of xenophobes or autarkic economic nationalists. And again,
no, there are some xenophobes.
rather than sort of, and when McTague then goes on to be like, the Home Secretary is the daughter of immigrants. I guess they're not xenophobic.
Bad example, Matt. Matt, the worst example you could have picked.
It's Tom. His name is Tom. You're bad example of a name.
Yeah, bad example of a name. Would be a better name, though, to be fair, than what he has.
Judge them on what they're fucking doing. Like, is it so hard to look up about the policing bill? Is it so hard to look up about like how they're going to criminalize trespass? Like, there's all these fucking terrifying authoritarian things they're doing. Like the asylum bill. I don't know if it's called the asylum bill, but the bill that affects asylum and immigration. Like, they're right there.
Well,
you can't say don't mistake them for authoritarians. It's like if I'm a painter and every painting I do is of a horse's head, and you interview me and I say, well, I don't paint horses' heads, you have to fucking acknowledge that there's some horses' heads.
But in Britain,
she does sell her used clothing, and in many ways, it's more interesting.
in Britain, almost uniquely among countries, I think, or almost uniquely sort of among the Anglosphere anyway, if you acknowledge what they do, instead of the fact that, what McTague says is, Donald Trump is unlikely to ever have used the word autarkic in conversation. So it's a difference of style.
He's much more likely to have said sad, pathetic, very, very low energy. Okay.
Right.
Thank you for defining the word autarkic for me through the medium of impression, because it made me feel so good about myself.
No, I don't know what it means. I was just saying things Donald Trump would say.
It means national economic self-sufficiency is an autarky.
Right.
Yeah.
A self-running. In the ancient Greek. This is what's interesting about the Tories, I think, which is that if you actually take the Tories at their word, like what they say they do, it doesn't really sound that bad. But when you actually take them at what they actually do, this is why I think they're so palatable to an American liberal audience. It was kind of what I was getting at earlier when I said that like the Tories are, at least in their stated positions, way to the left of the average American liberal. Not necessarily in what they'd like to do,
or in fact what they do, right? As Josie was saying earlier, like criminalization of like GRT people and stuff.
But in terms of what they claim to be in favor of. Whereas the Republicans would just be like, if you don't like it, we'll shoot you. Like, it's more like it's a different vibe.
The Democrats are like, if you don't like it, we'll shoot you. But they're like...
But also, the gun will have a pride flag on it.
I don't know if I totally agree with you here, though, because when I think about their manifesto in 2019, they explicitly said... like threatening things to the GRT community, and they explicitly were like, we're going to stop anyone ever moving here by any means, so they were quite clear about it.
Here's the thing, I think the thing is, right, looking at their manifesto, that's like kind of looking at what they said they would do, not what Tom McTague is doing, which is getting a vibe. So he says, for example,
you're right.
For example, he says, Donald Trump wanted to close the border, but Boris Johnson is letting in tons of Hong Kong refugees. Again, as though these things, understanding nothing about the context of anything that's going on, because the personal profile of someone in politics is worthless, and if the political operator you're talking to is at all savvy, going to be used by them as marketing.
Was also just like, and I'll make this like very short because I know that we're like running out of time soon. But it's also because this was designed to be, I can imagine like the way that this was commissioned was, that they wanted to do this sort of like long profile piece that you often like see in the New Yorker and stuff, which requires like its own like very specific skill in order to kind of like do an interrogation. It's not really just a matter of like writing lots of words. It's also like thinking about how narrative is formed and like how it's structured, and really like thinking about the actual structure of the piece rather than like, and for me, like when I kind of skimmed through this article, it sort of felt like this was a writer who really wanted to do a New Yorker piece at some point in his life, was kind of given this assignment, but didn't really know how to actually like approach it. So as a result, you know, you've got like, rather than kind of like notice the contradictions and like notice, or even kind of just like be aware of where he fits in the story, because I think, again, like to go back to something I was saying earlier, so much of the current Conservative Party is really about like their relationship to media and proximity. Like Boris Johnson, for all, you know, he may be the prime minister now, but he still has like the same instincts as he did when he was the editor of The Spectator, and like really was the editor to shape the current Spectator as it is, right? And I think that's like something we forget like a lot, that like ultimately his brain is still very much being, you know, the lazy editor who kind of like brought on Taki and stuff like that.
And we wonder why we feel like we're in hell. Like that's literally, you couldn't choose me, someone I would like to lead the country less than the fucking editor. Oh.
So as a result, you've just got this journalist who like has no idea that they're sort of being, like, the entire time you're reading this, you sort of know that he's being played, and he's desperately trying to kind of like craft this narrative that doesn't exist because he wants to fulfill his kind of fantasy of writing a New Yorker profile without kind of understanding how to do it. So as a result, we just get this like very messed up piece that like not only is completely like ineffective, but ultimately like runs cover for like, and rationalizes like Boris Johnson's decisions in a way that like didn't need to be justified, but also like were kind of not justifiable. He's sort of just done a lot of policy.
I choose to believe that 4 years ago, Tom McTague was on a train and he came up with the phrase tornado of bonhomie and decided that it was such a good phrase that he was going to build an entire article around it at some point, and this is what resulted.
Well, I mean, I think if you want to know, sort of, Hussein, to your point, right, like what is this a failure of journalism as we might think of what journalism should be? Yes, catastrophically. But in terms of getting Tom McTague some good profile, some good closeness with Johnson, an article in the Atlantic that lots of people will read, selling Johnson to a general type of Joe Biden voter when the US-UK relationship is incredibly crucial.
Yeah, in terms of appealing to certain ex-girlfriends of mine's mothers.
Yeah,
it's a great article.
Yeah, and I think that's why. I think, Milo, you're sort of like talking about this earlier, right? Where it's like, where the Tories sort of try to sell. They sort of know how to sell themselves without saying what it is that they're doing, but they know how to sell themselves as being kind of liberal looking if you squint. And again,
and also I think Toryism is riven with a kind of small L liberalism in the really traditional sense.
Absolutely.
Of the,
it is, because it always defends whatever the existing interests are. The Tories of today would defend, because the Tories of today defend the sort of cause célèbre of the liberal of the Gladstone era. Right? Like that is, it's just they exist to defend the powers that exist. And so, because the sort of Gladstone era liberalism sort of did pretty well, we live in a market economy now. They defend that power.
He didn't crash the train.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's or not necessarily saying Gladstone brought us the market economy, but more like they sort of know who the rich are and they sort of line up in front of them. And so it's no surprise they have a little bit of small L liberalism, but also like when small L liberalism is in crisis, then in order to defend it, it requires big F fascism. That's just the nature of the beast. That's the nature of the beast.
Big F's in chat, everyone.
And so it's one of these situations where, you have where in order to make sort of what they're actually doing more palatable to a sort of, as you might say, sort of small L or even big L liberal audience, in the case of America, you have a journalist who has come in and essentially been very cheerfully sold a bill of goods and then reproduced Tory party marketing in the Atlantic. Well, again, thinking he's being balanced, reproducing a bunch of attack lines like, oh, he said this about like, gay people or whatever, as though that sort of hasn't been sort of brought against him many times and sort of failed to stick. You could see like the sort of the balance of the sort of, well, maybe he's not what he says he is essentially a Washington Generals to the Boris Johnson is a new type of politician. He's unlike anything Britain's ever seen. And actually all of his political positions aren't because he's a big, mean fascist. It's because he wants Britain to succeed. And And then that's the Harlem Globetrotters in that relationship.
Does the article end with, and Mr. Johnson promised he'd be back with my wallet right away?
It might as well. It might as well. So yeah, that's the.
It ends with he's pregnant.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So congratulations
From
to
just one look.
Tom McTague on getting into a Big Daddy situation, or perhaps a junior situation, followed by a Big Daddy situation.
Yeah. He's going to be giving birth to Boris Johnson's 7th or 8th child.
It is not a tumor.
It's not a tumor.
Exactly. Thank you. So
I was writing an article for the Atlantic.
With all of that being said, Josie, I want to thank you very much for coming and spending some time with us today.
It's my pleasure. I am sorry if I'm not that coherent. I feel so deeply sad that Boris Johnson is what we have.
Yep.
I feel so deeply sad.
Well, if you feel sad about that, you should try reading this article because it makes a pretty good case for why actually you love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, do you know what? I was chatting with a cab driver today because I live in Glasgow, so it's a very different thing.
Right.
And he was a cool guy, and we were getting on and just talking about like being pro-vaccine, like just establishing that we both were not conspiracy theorists. And then even he was like, I will say this, I respect that Boris Johnson's tried his hardest. And I was like, even like people who don't like him will still spout this obviously disprovable bullshit.
Like school report type shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Applies himself.
Well, an A-star for Boris Johnson from the British press. Congratulations, you worked very hard for it. Yeah, and I think we'll see you on the bonus episode on Patreon, $5 a month, second episode per week.
That's right.
At better value you will find nowhere else.
It's the bonus one.
You can hear that being said in a different voice.
In a different voice. That is right.
The Patreon.
You can hear us talking about years and years.
Thing you get.
I've never heard the bonus voice because I don't subscribe.
When we stop the recording,
we'll
do the bonus voice. In the meantime, we'll see you all in a couple of days. Later.
Bye.